working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Asean in Focus on tonight's headlines. In less than 24 hours, a dire situation looms over Florida's Gulf Coast as Hurricane Idalia rapidly intensifies into a Category 2 storm in the Gulf of Mexico. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has declared a state of emergency across 49 counties, with 30 counties issuing evacuation orders. The looming threat of a life-threatening storm surge adds urgency to preparations. A disturbing trend has been unveiled in Southeast Asia, with the United Nations Human Rights Office revealing a surge in online criminal activity ensnaring countless individuals. Criminal syndicates in the region are resorting to shocking tactics of torture and coercion, fueling a thriving online scam industry that generates billions of dollars annually. Dr. Colin Kahl, U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, offers insights into the United States strategy to address global security challenges, particularly in the Indo-Pacific and Taiwan Strait regions. Thousands of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh demonstrate their determination on the 6th anniversary of their displacement, urgently calling for their safe return to Myanmar. They unite in a powerful display of resilience and hope. In under 24 hours, a dire scenario is set to unravel along Florida's Gulf Coast as Hurricane Idalia undergoes rapid intensification in the Gulf of Mexico, advancing to a formidable Category 2 storm. Anticipated to bring catastrophic and life-threatening consequences, Idalia bears the potential for a storm surge reaching up to 15 feet in select locales, accompanied by destructive winds reaching 125 miles per hour and a substantial risk of widespread flooding. These perilous projections emerge from the assessments of the National Hurricane Center. Let's listen in.
You can kind of see it here in the satellite image. An eye is starting to make an appearance here. It's starting to clear out. That is a sign that intensification is ongoing, and it was going to continue to strengthen during the overnight hours. If I switch over here to radar imagery, you can see the bands just sweeping across the Florida Panhandle already, or the Florida Peninsula already. And this is important because time is of the essence. There is no more time to monitor and hope for this system. If you're in this impacted area, and I'm going to break down the heaviest impacted areas here in a second, you won't have tomorrow. You will not have tomorrow to finalize your preparations. You have to do it this evening and tonight. You must rush preparation to completion in the next few hours, because you can see the bands already working their way into the peninsula.
Meanwhile, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida has declared a state of emergency across 49 counties, with 30 counties mandating evacuation orders.
The National Hurricane Center advisory includes that if this storm hits at high tide, storm surge could reach 10 to 15 feet in some areas of the Big Bend. That is life-threatening storm surge. That is storm surge that if you're there while that hits, it's going to be very difficult to survive that. So please take appropriate precautions.
The Central Gulf Coast, northern Big Bend area. If you have not evacuated, you need to do that right now. You need to drop what you're doing. You need to go to your room, pack up, pack your things, and get to safety. If you need power, you need to get to safety. You need to evacuate right now.
As concerns amplify over a prospect of a life-threatening storm surge engulfing coastal communities, the window for readiness is rapidly closing.
Let's switch over to the storm surge, because storm surge will be the biggest impact in Florida. And you can see here, if I zoom in here, we anticipate now the strongest and most impactful storm surge of 10 to 15 feet in the Florida Big Bend, including the small community of Cedar Key. So if you're watching us from Cedar Key, you got to get out of there. Those conditions are not at all survivable, so you got to get out of there. Impactful storm surge. So another place where if you've been ordered to evacuate, it is imperative that you follow those instructions immediately. We're really starting to run out of time with this one. So again, no longer watching. We're absolutely in the action phase.
It's scary. So I've removed all the furniture from the bottom of my house. Everything is upstairs or in the U-Haul. And I just hope that we don't get the flooding that they're thinking with the surge. I kind of was watching and waiting. But as soon as they said mandatory evacuation, absolutely. And I have family in Georgia, so we're going to go to Georgia and stay with family and friends.
The imminent threat of life-threatening storm surge remains paramount along Florida's Gulf Coast, with storm surge warnings in effect encompassing regions such as the Tampa Bay area and the Big Bend.
We're out on the water, so we get the first line hit, we're going to be the worst ones to get hit today. So that's really, we can't do nothing about it, so suck it up.
Trying to get everything up to high ground. We have 25 rental boats, so we've concentrated since yesterday morning getting them out on the high ground, secure. We have a restaurant downstairs, so we have about 25 tables. We've tried to get them up and kind of secure them to a fixed location.
Well, we're just shuttering up the best that we can, and then we're going to head over to another county over and evacuate to there.
President Joe Biden, responding to Florida's plea, authorized a pre-landfall emergency declaration.
We're worried about the surge, the ocean surge. We don't know exactly yet. It's hour to hour we're watching this, but I told the governor that and the mayor, and the regions that are likely to be hit first, that we're there as long as it takes. We're going to make sure they have everything they need. Thank you.
Florida's Emergency Operations Center now operates at Level 1, signifying around-the-clock operations until the storm's menace subsides. There are around 143,481 Filipinos living in Florida. And more disturbing news on the weather front today, as Super Typhoon Goring has prompted the raising of signal number 4 over portions of Batanes and Babuyan Islands earlier. Now, this intensification has now escalated Goring into a super typhoon. Pag-asa revealed that signal number 5 was initially raised over sections of Batanes and Babuyan Island due to the severity of the imminent winds.
Napanatili ang lakas ng hangin malapit sa gitna ng bagyo na umaabot sa 195 kilometers per hour at ang pagbukso na umabot sa 240 kilometers per hour. Isa siyang ganap na super typhoon, itong si Goring. At yun yung mapapansin, isa pang bagyo sa labas ng ating Philippine Area of Responsibility na may international name na Typhoon. Sa forecast track ni Bagyong Goring, patuloy ito kikilos generally northwestward patungo sa southern portion ng China. Kapag napanatili ang kilos nito, inaasahan po natin na labas ng par si Bagyong Goring mamayang gabi o bukas ng umaga. Nakataas pa ngayon ang signal number 2 sa Batanes at Babuyan Islands. Samantalang signal number 1 ay nakataas sa Ilocos Norte, Ilocos Sur, ganoon din po sa northern portion ng Abra at ganoon din po sa Apayao at northern at central portion ng Cagayan.
However, this alert level has been subsequently downgraded as Goring bypassed the area without making landfall. Although the super typhoon is anticipated to exit the Philippine Area of Responsibility on either Wednesday night or Thursday morning, it has left its mark on the nation's weather landscape. As Goring starts to move away, the spotlight turns to another weather disturbance.
Dako na tayo sa isang bagyo na ang may international name na Typhoon ay nasa layo 1,465 kilometers silangan ng extreme northern Luzon. So isa siyang severe tropical storm. Mula kahapon, lumakas pa ang bagyong ito. Ngayon, ang lakas ng hangin malapit sa gitna ng bagyo ay nasa 110 kilometers per hour. Samantala, yung pagbukso ng hangin ay nasa 135 kilometers per hour.
Although Hana is projected to exit the PAR by Friday, the likelihood of it directly impacting the country appears low, with Pag-asa ruling out any landfall at this time. The dynamic nature of our weather underscores the importance of staying informed and prepared during these extraordinary times, and we will keep you updated as developments unfold. A significant report uncovering a disturbing trend in Southeast Asia. The United Nations Human Rights Office has issued a stern warning about the surge of online criminal activity that has ensnared hundreds of thousands of individuals in the region. Criminal syndicates operating in Southeast Asia have resorted to heinous tactics of torture and coercion to ensnare countless individuals into a thriving online scam industry, raking in billions of dollars annually. The OHCHR, shedding light on this dire situation, held a press briefing.
Victims face a range of serious violations and abuses, including threats to their safety and security, and many have been subjected to torture and cruel, inhumane and degrading treatment or punishment, arbitrary detention, sexual violence, forced labour and other human rights abuses.
Now, the OHCHR disclosed that at least 120,000 individuals in Myanmar and an additional 100,000 in Cambodia find themselves trapped in situations where they are coerced into carrying out lucrative online scams, ranging from illicit gambling to cryptocurrency fraud.
While some countries in Southeast Asia have put in place legal and policy frameworks relevant to counter-trafficking, in some cases they fall short of international standards. In many cases, their implementation has failed to respond adequately to the context and sophistication of these online scams.
Furthermore, countries such as Laos PDR, the Philippines, and Thailand have emerged as significant destinations or transit points for this criminal activity. However, instead of receiving the protection and support they desperately need, these victims often find themselves facing criminal charges or immigration penalties, as the OHCHR highlighted.
They are victims. They are not criminals. In continuing to call for justice for those who have been defrauded through online criminality, we must not forget that this complex phenomenon has two sets of victims.
Pia Oberoy, a senior advisor on migration and human rights at the OHCHR, authored the comprehensive report, and she provided insight into the mechanics of these scams, including one particularly sinister scheme known as the pig butchering scheme.
One of the main ones that we hear about is the so-called pig butchering scheme, where the targets of the scam are approached in a romance kind of scam and basically scammed out of their money, thinking that they are speaking to somebody who is interested to be romantically involved with them. And in fact, last year we learned about the tragic death of a person from Malaysia who had traveled into Thailand and then been trafficked into Myanmar, thinking that he was responding to the advances of somebody. But because of the stigma of having been scammed, they will not be reporting this. They'd rather kind of, not suffer that shame and stigma of having been the victim of a scam. In the same vein, people that have been trafficked into these scam compounds suffer not just physical abuse and mental abuse, but financial ruin in many cases, because they have taken on debts, and then to release themselves from these scam compounds, they take on more debt. But they also take on stigma and shame, particularly, as we said, because of the profile of these people. They're not uneducated.
Now, far removed from his family in China, Lu's story is one of heart-wrenching exploitation, as he joins a sorrowful multitude of individuals enticed into Cambodian scam factories These factories orchestrate elaborate online romance and cryptocurrency investment cons, subjecting their victims to trafficking, abuse, and captivity. As global attention is increasingly drawn to this distressing issue, Cambodian authorities have undertaken high-profile operations, liberating over 1,000 foreign nationals from 3 compounds in Sihanoukville last year. Nevertheless, international observers and human rights organizations remain cautious, expressing doubts about the effectiveness of these measures. Concerns linger that these criminal groups might not be dismantled, but rather are shifting their operations to new locations.
In the Gulf of Thailand, a once sleepy resort town has been transformed by Chinese investment. But the casinos of Sihanoukville, a hub for Chinese gamblers, have also become a focus for organised crime groups. They've switched from gambling to scamming.
園區到園區外再想跑咪來不及咯。
嗰時冇懷疑佢嘅，不過我有啲 friend 咧就話：喂，小心啊！你網上識人好多騙子㗎喎，你要小心啊！
People from China and Hong Kong to Vietnam and Thailand have been sucked into what a UN official calls a living hell. Buildings that look like nondescript apartments like these are actually ground zero for scamming operations. A victim by the name of Lu was attracted to work in Cambodia by promises of high salaries in construction work. But he ended up in a compound with hundreds of other workers unable to leave.
上面现在还有那个呢，还有这个结的这个扎的这个过程中啊，我逃跑了4次吧，啊，20天了。对，所以说我说的呀，3天一小时，5天一大餐了，反正就这回事儿，反正你打不死我就想跑。
Lu and others would seek targets online and groom them to invest in cryptocurrency platforms. They did this by setting up fake online profiles on TikTok, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Where scammers once approached their victims over the phone, more and more the trend is to use social network apps under the cover of cryptocurrency investment and targeting middle and high-income earners. Annie, a young professional in Hong Kong, said she was subject to a love scam. She met a good-looking Chinese engineer on the dating app Bumble. He called her almost daily, but they never met in person. She was then tricked into trading cryptocurrency on a fake platform.
其實我覺得疫情係令到好多人孤獨咗嘅，係啦，寂寞咗。咁喺呢個咁嘅時候，有個人日日喺你電，即係話雖然你見唔到佢，但係日日喺個耳邊嗰度同你講嘢。 即係我有時開玩笑，我話其實佢好似提供一種服務咁樣，但係你唔知呢個服務係咁貴㗎。
There are fears that cracking down on scammers in one area may push the group simply to relocate to another country.
We're going to need Cambodia to take action with Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, the Philippines. Basically, the Asean region needs to come to terms with the fact that the conditions that criminals are looking for are basically scattered across certain parts of this region. Very, very favorable to them. So let's put on the table what types of illicit activities, criminal activities are taking place there, how can we address those criminal activities holistically, strategically. If not, we're going to have them bounce around the region and just go from place to place.
Deprived of money and passports, trafficked workers have found it difficult to escape. Cambodian police carried out a string of high-profile raids on scam compounds in the summer. But observers fear those responsible may simply relocate and hunt for more victims.
Dr. Colin Kahl, the U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, reflects on the U.S.'s approach to global security challenges. This conversation, hosted by Chatham House, Dr. Colin Kahl, in his measured response, draws upon the concept of the security dilemma, the self-fulfilling prophecy of escalating tensions. Now, he alludes to the potential danger of portraying a threat so intensively that it escalates into a self-fulfilling conflict.
You and I were students of Bob Jervis, right? We all have to be worried of the, self-fulfilling prophecy of the security dilemma. That in portraying a threat and arming and preparing for it, you actually make the threat worse and you run the risk of a spiral to some self-fulfilling conflict. And I think we're very mindful of that possibility with the PRC and with other actors. And of course, part of the rhetoric coming out of Beijing is that we've hyped the threat, that it's a China threat model that we're using to contain their national ambitions, and that China doesn't pose a challenge to the free world.
Dr. Cao acknowledges that China's criticism of the U.S. for hyping the threat is part of the discourse. However, Dr. Cao counters this perspective by highlighting the concerns of various nations in the Indo-Pacific region.
So, for example, a little, about a year ago, an Australian aircraft, reconnaissance aircraft, manned, flying in international airspace, was intercepted by a PLA aircraft that flew right in front of it and released flares and chaff back into the engine, intentionally, of the Australian aircraft. And when the protest was, this is an international airspace, they were like, don't get so close to China. The Philippines has been serially harassed by, some combination of PLA, Navy, Coast Guard, maritime militia, et cetera. So you essentially, in the parlance of international relations theory that we were trained in, you're essentially seeing balancing coalitions form in the Indo-Pacific. The fact that India has made the pivot that it has in many respects is a consequence of the increased threat they perceive along their shared land, the disputed land border with China, and the clashes that emerged in 2020.
Dr. Cao also delves into the essence of the National Defense Strategy, which is rooted in deterrence rather than conflict.
I think we don't see a conflict with China as imminent or inevitable. And we certainly don't see it as desirable. It would be disastrous. It would be disastrous for China. It'd be disastrous for the United States. It'd be disastrous for the world economy. It would be profoundly destabilizing in every way. So we don't want a conflict. We also don't think it makes sense to have a world in which China can do to its neighbors what Russia is trying to do to Ukraine. And China has, potentially has ambitions, whether it's across the Taiwan Strait or in the East China Sea or the South China Sea. And a world in which the strong do what they will and the weak suffer what they must is a world in which the rules-based international order is replaced by the law of the jungle. And I'm not sure that, we want the 2030s to look like the 1930s. We're conscious about that. So that's why the National Defense Strategy is rooted around deterrence, not conflict. And we want the leadership in Beijing to wake up every single day and say, today is not the day.
We now turn our attention to Chile, where a devastating natural disaster has struck. Torrential flooding has unleashed havoc in the central southern region, resulting in significant destruction, loss of life, and the displacement of thousands. Kevin Cortez reports from our bureau in Chile.
Torrential flooding has caused widespread damage in Chile's central southern region, leaving 3 people dead and thousands evacuated. The rains have been relentless, pounding isolated communities with devastating force. President Gabriel Boric has declared a state of catastrophe in the affected area. The flooding is the latest in a series of extreme weather events to hit Chile in recent months. In June, the country experienced some of the heaviest rainfall in 3 decades, which led to the evacuation of thousands of people and caused widespread damage to infrastructure.
Minuto estuvo fuerte y tuvimos que ir a casa a resguardarla también. Si al final está bien que uno evacúe, pero hay una mezcla ahí como medio chocante, porque igual quieres salvar tus cosas o mirar, no sé qué pasa con nosotros los seres, pero lo pudimos controlar, menos mal.
The El Niño weather pattern is blamed for the flooding, which has also been exacerbated by rising temperatures. The forecasters expect more rain to fall in the coming days, which could further worsen the situation.
Y abrimos la puerta y empezó a entrar así, y de las 6 a las 6:15 llegó a las rodillas, y de las rodillas nos subió a las caderas, y de las caderas ya no había nada más que hacer. Había que sacar, nosotros perdimos todo, pérdida total nuestra casa. Nada, nosotros sacamos a nuestros papás, que son adultos mayores, una señora de 74.
President Boric has urged people to heed evacuation orders and to stay safe. He has also called on the international community for assistance. The flooding is a major humanitarian crisis, and the full extent of damage is still unknown. However, it is clear that thousands of people have been affected, and the situation is likely to worsen in the coming days. Stay tuned for more updates.
Reporting from Santiago, Chile, this is Kevin Cortez. We live in extraordinary times.
And finally in our news, after months of casting calls and competitions in the Philippines and Filipino communities abroad, PEPS Foundation Incorporated has formally introduced the 10th Misters of Filipinas official candidates. Now, the candidates were presented to the public at a press conference held at the Samsung Performing Arts Theater in Makati City. The event was hosted by Ryan Tercero, Miss Fitness Supermodel World Philippines, Cristel Galang, and Mr. Fitness Supermodel World Philippines, Maiko Toledo. The candidates are vying for one of the 5 coveted titles of the competition: Man of the World, Man Hot Star International, Mr. Model Worldwide, Mr. Tourism and Culture Universe, and Mr. Runway Model Universe. The past winners of the Misters of Filipinas competition have gone on to represent the Philippines in various international pageants, including Man of the World, Manhunt International, and Mr. Model International.
It's actually my goal and motivation to inspire a lot of young men in the Philippines para ma-achieve nila yung dreams nila. Yun, napasabak tayo, and then I competed in Manhunt International 2010. Tapos that was the time na actually na-open up sa akin ng male pageantry. And that was the time na na-inspire ako to do the Misters of Filipinas. And I manifested that this Misters of Filipinas will be one of the biggest and most prestigious male pageant in the Philippines. The coronation, please watch Misters of Filipinas this coming September 17 at Samsung Performing Arts Theater.
As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angela. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.